What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So recently I've seen a couple comments where you guys have been upset but also kind of happy. Mostly upset though. You guys want me to work on a project car, something cool, and honestly I want to do something cool too. In the shop lately we've just been focusing on some F-250s, buying and selling some stuff, trying to make some coin, but we finally pulled in a really cool project which I'm pretty excited about, which is this right here. You guys ready for this? Check this out. This thing actually has a 1JZ GTE non-VVTi turbo, like a factory turbo engine from Japan. So the Mark III Supra in Japan, it actually came with the 7M GTE for a while, just like it did over here in the United States, but the later versions actually came with a 1J. We never got the 1JZ over here in the United States, but somebody actually imported a JZ and actually swapped it in here, along with a big single turbo, a coil radiator, and an R154 transmission. At one point it was running around Vegas with the stock ECU, wiring harness, all that other stuff. They were kind of having some issues with it, so they ended up getting wiring Specialties harness, an ECU Master EMU Black, and they never started it. So they never connected all of the pieces to it. Before we start down this journey of building this car and deciding like what we're gonna do with it, first off we need to do a compression test, make sure that the engine is healthy. After that, I wanna just connect everything and get it started. So that's gonna be the goal of today's videos. Can we get this 1JZ to start? And then after that, we might pull it out, clean up the bay, reseal some oil leaks, change up the turbo setup, redo some of the intercooler piping. But let's see if we get this thing compression tested, see how it looks. Cylinder number one, that's looking pretty good for a 1J that's been sitting for 2 or 3 years, almost 150. So number two, 150. Look at that, a little bit more, but still, you know, we're in like the 10% range. It's like 160. So 4, look at that unit. Number 5, about 150. All right, so we're all within 10%. And it also hasn't rained in a long time. So about 150 is our baseline. We had one, actually we had 2 in the middle that were about 160. I think we should be good to go. So this car is in a very big project car state. If you look over here on the passenger floorboard, so this is a brand new wiring Specialties harness that has not been connected or terminated to the chassis. The next cool thing about it is it came with this brand new ECU Master EMU Black, which is one of my favorite ECUs. So we're gonna go ahead and get all of this stuff connected so that way we can actually start this thing and see if it's a good car. All right, so the thing about somebody else's project car is that you just never know. Look at all this wiring right there. We got a starter jumper that's maybe, I don't know if this chassis was auto, but that looks like some like starter jumper wire situation right there. Plus then, look at all this. Wires just going places that we don't even know. This is the wire that goes down to the starter and gives it power. Here is a lot of the stuff that actually needs to go to the starter, a ground, some of that other stuff. And this is actually, right here it says starter power. So if you're ever using a wiring Specialties harness, you're not giving the starter power with this thing. You could actually fry your ECU and your harness if you like think that that's the starter power. So the starter gets its own power from, let's say, something prettier than this. This is actually where the harness gets a lot of its power, is from that starter. So give the starter its own power wire, and then this is essentially the battery connection that goes to the ECU, and then the relays get triggered from there. I made that mistake once. So also look at this intercooler piping. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. All right, so I'm actually pretty glad we pulled the intake manifold off, because there's a coolant line that goes to the oil filter housing that was loose, and then there's also the fuel line. There's an AN line here in the back that was loose as well. It's nice to, you know, figure out all these issues right now before we get too far. All right, so we made some decent progress on here. Everything on the intake manifold side is connected, hooked up, plugged in. We got vacuum lines running. We have a line running to the wastegate. We have vacuum caps on all the things. We got TPS plugged in, idle air. We have hoses connected. On this side of the engine bay, I'm pretty sure this is like a knockoff 3582, like a ball bearing one with a compressor. That's just like a really common style of turbo, but it's actually a T3 with kind of a small exhaust housing. So it'll probably spool up pretty decent. We are on the stock injectors, which I think are like, they're not that big. So we'll definitely be limited to maybe around 300 and some horsepower on the stock injectors. But the next thing that we really need to do is actually move on to the inside of the car and start messing with some of that wiring. All right, so that leads us to the inside of the car. We have the wiring specialties harness, which is going to connect to the ECU Master EMU Black. And you could tell that this car had, so, you know, it lived a previous life on the stock ECU. So we have an electronic boost controller, we have this PLX wideband right there, and with the EMU Black paired with the wiring specialties harness, the ECU Master has all that functionality and everything. So we have an integrated wideband, we're gonna have electronic boost control, so we don't need to run anything. We don't have to have like a boost gauge or anything in here because we'll probably end up running like a CAN gauge. So we'll be able to see all of the data that is on the EMU Black. We'll get to that in the future, but essentially for right now, this is their universal swap harness. So instead of having like a plug and play chassis integration, pretty much what we need to do is give this power and ground switched ignition. But the nice thing is this gives us our own fuel pump relay, our own fan relay, and our own ignition switched relay, which will kind of power a lot of the chassis stuff. So we'll be able to power the fuel pump, power the fan relay, and a bunch of other little things straight from this harness, all directly through the ECU. It also has some chassis integration stuff. So we have like the speedometer, we have the tachometer, and all that other stuff that we'll just have to tie into the factory ECU wiring, and that stuff isn't that hard to get to work. So we just need to look up some wiring diagrams, connect some wires, and we might be able to start this thing today. So we're gonna connect some power because we want to see some things. So right here we have a little Honda battery. We don't have a connector terminal thing on this side, so we're just, and then I'm gonna grab my power probe and we're gonna see what happens. There's a connector on the passenger side up there. So we're gonna see like what happens, ignition switch, because pretty much all we need to do is just give one wire power, ignition switched. It should trigger the relay, give everything else power, and then we should off of that then be able to just like jump the starter signal, and then it should, in theory, maybe run. We also need to see about the fuel pump. I don't know how they had it wired, because now we're bypassing like the OEM wiring. So they might have had it wired OEM, but I don't hear fuel pump or anything turned on, and the ignition's on right now. So as long as we have a fuel pump that turns on, ECU that turns on, do you hear that? Something's on. We're gonna kick the mouse out and then we're gonna try to start this thing. All right, so this is a power probe, and this thing is really, really useful. You can run this over to the battery, and then you can give yourself power and ground wherever you want it. You know, we have power right here, and you go right there. That means we have ground. But then let's say we want to give something power, we just go boop, and if we want to give it ground, we go boop. But also it'll tell you if you have power and if you have ground. So like, check this out. So the radiator fan, it's just over here, it's stuck. So this is some not really good wiring. We'll just go right here in this connector. And we're gonna be able to see now when we turn the ignition on, like what has power, what has ground. Oh, I'm ripping. That's not good. You know what that means? It means that we got a leak. I wasn't expecting that. I don't think you're ready for this. For what is about to... Oh, jeez. All right, keep going.
Like, screw that recirc.
Keep going.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, a little band-aid there or something. That's
Okay.
interesting.
Now keep going.
Oh, look at that. That's pretty. Drop it down to like what, 1.5 inch tip?
Oh, look, it's got a big hole right here too.
Extra breather.
Maybe that's just loose right there.
That'd be nice. Oh, yeah. So that's a factory inverted flare. Looks like to
a non-inverted flare.
yeah.
I wonder if you could get an acorn and just stick an acorn in there, and if it would like, you know what I'm saying? Look at that. Oh, so that's what it actually was. Look at this. So it wasn't even this. This was probably okay. It was that.
Oh, I bet that was leaking too. You know, that's dreeping away.
I thought we were just gonna like probe the starter, throw a tune in it, and burn, you know, fire it up. But now we got to figure out a couple more things, which is, you know, it's fine. It's just part of it. So my custom line, it was too old and it just didn't work. So based upon the blue and red fittings, it was probably something that I pulled off another car. So I'm gonna see if I have any other non-PTFE line, and if I don't, I could make it out of PTFE with some, you know, Deechworks lines and fittings and stuff. I was just trying to be quick. All right, we're gonna try it again. Oh yeah, that fitting is the wrong fitting, but we'll get the right fitting for it. I mean, obviously they had it running like that forever, and their line just ended up popping off. They had the wrong fittings. They had a PTFE fitting with non-PTFE line without the acorn in it. If you know what that means. Now, you know what that means? We might be able to freaking start this unit. Check this out. So we got sent this thing from Amazon. This is a Yesper. This thing is a 6,000 amp lithium jump starter. Look how big it is. You just hold this guy. It will do 12 volt and 24 volt, plus power some USB outputs, which is pretty cool. You can charge it with USB-C, and it's gonna give us a little extra, power. Because I think you know, this little Honda battery is not really doing that great. So we're gonna go ahead and jump this, give it some extra power. Look at that. It's happy. So we cranked it. Nothing happened. It didn't start, it didn't do anything. Over here on the ECU Master on the bottom, it'll say sync or no sync. And as you're cranking, it'll say synchronizing, and then it'll turn green as soon as it's synchronized. And that's basically showing you that the cam and crank sensors are lining up, and they're like, all right, cool. Here's ignition and here's fuel, you know? Anyhow, cranked it, nothing happened. Sync was working. So I was like, okay, well, we should have did this to begin with, but the EMU Black has a test outputs feature. So right here, if I go to the output on the injector, you can't do this with when the engine's running, but injector 1, you click it, you go like this, but we don't hear anything. The only one, and we did that with all 6 injectors and all 6 ignition coils, and the only one that makes noise is injector 2. Watch, listen to this. So, nothing's working. Normally, even on an ignition coil, you could hear it kind of go ding, 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 like a little like arcing the spark plug sort of deal. You should for sure be able to hear all of the injectors. The crazy thing is, the only one that's working is injector number 2. So either something seriously wrong with something, maybe we're dealing with some grounding issues. I'm not exactly sure. We definitely need to go through it a little bit more, and it's definitely not gonna run with all of those outputs not working. You know, we have cam and cranksync, which is good, but now we just need to get it to fire on the outputs. So I guess I'm gonna double check some settings and make sure everything is all right in the ECU. I don't know why we would need to chase wires or anything like that, but we might. All right, so we did a continuity test and we figured out all of the coils are pinned right, everything is right. We have continuity from the ignition coil to the ECU. We have continuity from the injectors to the ECU. We have power to the coils and we have power to the injectors. So we figured out it was an issue. Our coils weren't firing because I had the setting with an amplifier, but it's actually coils without an amplifier. This is the factory amplifier that would typically go on one of these guys. And so we deleted that. And so it's coils without an amplifier now. Now you could hear the little spark plug kind of ticking when you do the test outputs. Number 2 injector was the only one that was firing. And we moved that connector over to injector 3, tested it, didn't work. We moved injector number 3, circuit over to number 2, tested it, and it fired the injector perfectly. So there's definitely something physically wrong with the solenoids of the injectors. This car's been sitting for a while. So we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna try to start it with some starting fluid now that we have the ignition coils working correctly. So all we're gonna do is give it a little spritz of starting fluid and then fire it up. So it runs a little bit. I don't have a way to like start it and like continue to spray unless we just set the camera down and you start it and then I continue spraying some stuff. So I guess the injectors kind of came back. Check this out. He's running decent too. Other than a little stumpy. Next thing I'm curious about, will it drive? All right guys, it is the next day and we're gonna go ahead and fire this thing up and maybe take it for a drive down the street. Let me make sure it has some coolant in it. Has enough coolant. I know it has some, but oh. You know, maybe we should do one of those pressure tests. All right, so we're trying to pressure test this thing before we go drive it because there's not much coolant in it, or there's not any coolant in it. So we're gonna go ahead, pressure test it, see if we could make sure that there's not a leak anywhere, and then if there is, we're gonna fix it, and if there's not, then we're gonna put coolant in it so we can drive it. Is that the hose or what is that?
The radiator's destroyed. You can see here it's all expanded from the bottom.
Alright, so first driving this thing, Mostly doing it just to test the chassis, the transmission, everything else, make sure that it runs and drives and shifts. And it seems like it's doing that. Second gear. Well, she shifts in all the gears. Now it just needs, you know, pulled apart and completely redone. All right, so we just drove it up the street. Everything drove nice, like it ran, it drove, it shifted all right. Obviously, it needs some tuning because that was just on the base map, which isn't good at all. I would really like to put a little bit more time in this thing, like driving it around before we pull things apart, because I definitely want to spend some time and redo the intercooler piping, possibly do different turbo, do some other stuff. But it would be cool to like kind of see what we could make like power wise, you know, on this turbo with the stock injectors, probably around 300 and something. But the problem is we gotta get some coolant in it so that way we could do that. So might pull the radiator out real quick and see if we could maybe weld it or JB weld it or figure out what the issue is, and then we'll go from there. Ooh. If you ever need a drain pan and the one that you have is a little bit too tall or you can't find it, this is it right there. Now where's the leak? Pushed up and pissed off right there. Right there, right there, right there, right. Oh, all along the whole bottom. This is the radiator out of my S14, so maybe JZ S14, JZ Mark III Supra. So it's kind of in the wrong, you know, like that thing's kind of in the way. It's close, but it's not. I mean, I feel like some JB Weld would do this thing some good. All right, guys, so we got the car running, driving, we drove it down the road. The radiator, unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to fix today. I might just patch it up real quick with some JB Weld, which I need to stop at the store and grab a little bit extra tomorrow. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and order a brand new coil radiator for this thing. Cause I think this thing, you know, it's a Supra, it's a Mark III Supra. I know a lot of people don't really jive with them, but I feel like they're coming back. I think maybe not even that they're coming back. I think they're like on the beginning of their rise because the price of Mark IVs are just so freaking expensive. But this is such a cool platform, and it's, you know, it's like the grandpa to the old Mark IV. Definitely a cool car, has a lot of potential. I think we're gonna go ahead, JB Weld it, maybe put some bigger injectors in it, stick it on the dyno as it is, see how much power it makes, and then we're gonna pull this thing completely out, clean up the engine bay, paint the engine block, put a nice turbo manifold on it, put some bigger injectors, do a nice exhaust, clean up the interior, and then kind of go from there. So let me know what you guys think about this car. Let me know what you guys think we should do with it, whether we should flip it, just sell it, should I drive it around for a little bit, or should we do a giveaway on it? But appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what you think. See you later.